Today we're looking at what are the most popular retirement spots outside the US for 2023. Every couple of years we like to find out where all the silver hairs are migrating to. Being one myself, I'm always interested in this subject. Not all of us stay in the US for our golden years. Some of us decide to give another country a go. Retirees are finding new ways to do retirement. One of the biggest hurdles we face in retirement is our budget. More than half the people that can actually retire do it on a serious budget. This, of course, leads a lot of us to do some serious Google research. In that research, we start looking at things like how to save money in retirement, how to stretch your retirement dollar, where's the best early bird specials, do strip clubs have a senior discount, what the hell is a reverse mortgage, and eventually you find some websites that tell the wonderful stories about retiring abroad. And as you go deeper into that, you realize that there are some nice countries to retire to that are half the price of living in the US. And about that time, some man named Hank leans over his shoulder and yells, "Carol, we're moving to Belize." Today we're looking at the most popular countries for expat retirees in 2023. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Portugal. Portugal is, I think, an often overlooked European country, especially for retirees. Right off the bat, it's in Europe. It's connected to Spain. It's almost in the Mediterranean. It's got a long coastline with the Atlantic Ocean. So people just assume this is a very expensive European country. It really isn't. They have some amazing towns with colonial-style architecture all over this country. It has a really good healthcare system. Good percentage of the population speaks English. And a retired couple can live on about $2,000 a month in Portugal. You might be able to get away with it a little bit lower than that, but you're probably going to have to budget pretty good. Number 9, Ecuador. Ecuador shares a border with Colombia, Peru, and the Pacific Ocean. It's not really a border, but you know what I mean. Most of Ecuador lives on the west side of the country. The east side is the frickin' wilderness. Ecuador is one of the countries that's fortunate enough to have the Andes Mountains running through it, and it goes right down the middle of the country just about. The Andes are the world's largest mountain range, extending through 7 countries and topping out at 22,000 feet, almost 23,000. It's actually 22,834 feet. Ecuador has a really low cost of living and a solid healthcare system. Cool thing is, Ecuador wants you to move there. There's always some hoops you gotta jump through. You just don't fly down there and call it home. There's always some red tape, but Ecuador kind of, they make it pretty easy. You can retire in Ecuador on about $1,800 a month, give or take a little bit. Now, these are 2022 numbers, even though we're talking about 2023. So if you watch this video 6 months down the line, 3 years down the line, the numbers are gonna change a little bit. The way the world's economy is going right now, it could change next week. Number 8, Colombia. Most Americans, including myself, remember the good old days of Pablo Escobar when it comes to Colombia. Colombia is nothing like that anymore. They do have some spots, but really, it is nothing like the glory days of the 1990s and 80s. Colombia is a pretty great place to retire, though. It has plenty of coastline on both Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean. And like Ecuador, it's got the Andes Mountains right there also. They have a rainy season, but for the most part, most of Colombia, at least the populated areas, have decent weather. It's warm, it can get humid, but it's decent. Colombia has solid healthcare, an easy visa process, and a low cost of living. Obviously, it depends on where you move to and where you live, but you could survive there and live pretty good on about $2,000 a month. Number 7, France. This is another one like Portugal. Obviously, you're going to think it's expensive. It's France. Everyone knows of Venice. Everyone knows about Paris. And stop typing. Venice is in Italy. Be honest, who was leaving the comment? France has amazing cities and outstanding rural communities. Obviously, if you move to Paris or something like that, it's going to be very expensive. But the smaller towns and the rural areas are affordable. The thing that really puts France on this list over a lot of other countries is the healthcare. France has excellent healthcare. It's high quality healthcare that is still affordable. If you're living outside the cities, there's a lot of nice communities where you could live pretty comfortably on about $2,200 a month. Number 6, Guatemala. Guatemala almost gets on this list for cost of living alone. It is cheap to live in Guatemala. This one's no secret. It's not like Guatemala just sprung up and Americans are learning about it. It's been a popular spot for expats for quite some time. Don't be surprised if you find a whole bunch of People just like you. Find Hank and Carol, tell them you heard about them on a video. Guatemala has beautiful mountains, plenty of forest. They got a nice patch of Pacific coastline and a little sliver of beach in the Caribbean Sea. Yes, it stretches all the way across Central America, which really isn't hard to do, especially down that area. For some reason, people think Panama is the only one that has, two separate coastlines, the Caribbean and the Pacific. Costa Rica has it, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala. The only two that don't have both bodies of water is El Salvador and Belize. I will be in Belize 8 days from now. You could live comfortably in Guatemala for about $1,500 a month. Obviously, I'm talking about American dollars. Don't come at me talking about loonies or anything like that. Number 5, Spain. Finishing off our European countries, we have Spain. Again, you probably thought it was too expensive, but really it's not. Downtown Barcelona, Madrid, places like that, it's gonna be a little pricey. But if you get out into the small towns, in the rural areas, it is definitely affordable. Side note, I had a conversation with a young man who is going to study abroad. He's a freshman in college, and he asked about Spain, and then he said, I bet their Mexican food's really good. I said, I'm sure they got some good places that have Mexican food, and as the conversation evolved, I realized he kind of thought that that's what the national food of Spain is Mexican food. Sure, they're both speaking Spanish, but that's about it. And when I kind of explained to him that there's a pretty serious difference between these two countries, and I'm not just talking about where they are on a map, he was all, are you kidding? Really? I weep for our college students. But if you could afford it, it's not as cheap as some of the other places. If you could afford Spain, it is one of the best places to retire as an American on the planet. Good food, fine wine, the Mediterranean, great healthcare, and it is affordable. You could survive, not in the big cities, obviously, but you could live comfortably on $2,000 a month in some of the smaller towns. Number 4, Mexico. More and more people are moving to Mexico all the time. It's got some problems with cartels and there's some dangerous places, but for the most part, it's a nice country to live in. If your only experience is like Tijuana and Juarez, Ensenada maybe, yeah, it's not the best country if that's all you've seen. Sadly, that is what most Americans do see. It's almost like if someone came from another country and all they saw was Detroit and Camden, New Jersey. That's what it's like if you only see Juarez, Tijuana, and Ensenada. Mexico, though, is definitely a place to know before you go. Where should you live? Where should you visit? What should you avoid? Things like that. Some of the best things about Mexico is you're right there next to the US, so getting back and forth is pretty easy. They've got a low cost of living, beautiful beaches, the Caribbean and the Pacific side, and you can live comfortably on about $1,800 a month here. Number 3, Panama. Who doesn't want to live in Panama? I love Panama. One of my favorite countries. A lot of the old military bases, because the US used to have a ton of military bases there, now not so much, but a lot of them, like PATCOM, are now communities where people have condos, and a lot of American retirees will live there. Panama is a beautiful country with amazing people. Panama's got everything from jungles to mountains to amazing coastlines. If you take a hike in the forest, A, be careful, but B, every little bend you go around, there's a new river, a waterfall, a creek, a stream. There's water everywhere here. Here in the United States, if there's any kind of water going over any kind of cliff, like a 7-foot tall waterfall will have a name. That's what we're kind of used to. When I was in Panama for the first time, we had these guides with us. I'm like, what's this waterfall called? And he's like, doesn't have a name. Okay. Later on, we saw a bigger one that was probably dropping about 2 stories. I'm like, was this waterfall got a name? He's like, no. Do you name waterfalls? I was like, yeah, we do. He's like, we have too many. Panama has okay healthcare, so, it's not the world's best, but it's decent and it is affordable. They have some great golf courses, amazing fishing, and you can live comfortably in Panama on about $1,400 a month. Number 2, Belize. Belize is a great little country sandwiched in between Mexico and Guatemala. It has miles of Caribbean coastline, and a good percentage of the people here speak English, so less of a chance of running into language barriers. Belize has a lot of mellow beach towns along the Caribbean coastline. Just pick one and hang out. This is another one of the countries I will be going to next week, and I'll have videos up about it a few weeks after I get back. Belize shows up at number 2 because almost everyone speaks English. They have decent health care, pretty stable government, and you could live comfortably as a couple here for about $1,800 a month. If you want to cut costs a little bit, you could definitely get by in about $1,200. On $3,000 a month, you could live like a king in Belize because their cost of living is pretty low. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link for that down below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Costa Rica. This is a very popular one for Americans, and it has been for about 4 decades now. I have a cousin that goes down there and surfs at least once a year. Goes down and spends like 2 weeks just surfing in Costa Rica. It's a very welcoming country for Americans. It's another one that has the Caribbean Sea on the east side and the Pacific Ocean on the west side. And it's considered one of the safest countries in Latin America. They don't even have an army. Now, besides all that good stuff, their cost of living is very, very low. It's actually the lowest on this list. Cost of food, rent, and healthcare is much cheaper than any place else in Latin America or Europe or North America. They say you can get by on less than $1,000 a month. If you want to live big, $1,100. I read one guy's blog who lives in Costa Rica. He retired early, and he says he survives on about 8,000 American dollars a year. At that price, I'm sure a lot of top ramen is involved, or he's living off the land. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.